Hi, I'm going to create a short video here about using the basics of CSS Grid to lay out a web page. You can see on the screen here the template I'm going to use. So let's get started. I'm going to start off by creating a new file. I'm going to call it index.html, and I'm going to set up my HTML code here. Simple grid layout. I'm going to create a container. The container represents all of this around the outside. Inside our container, we're going to have a header section. We're going to have a sidebar, and we're going to have a main. And you can see how they're laid out in a pretty simple grid like this. So we'll put in the structure. Got a header, and a side for our sidebar, and we've got a main. Just going to have our main content in it. And that's the basics of creating a page with grid. Decide what you want it to look like. Put up the basic sections of your page and construct the HTML to go with that. Let's have a look at what the CSS is going to look like in order to get our page to set up like that. So I'm going to create a new page here. I'm going to call it style.css. I'm going to start with a reset. I'm just going to set my margins to 0 and my padding to 0. I'm also going to set box sizing to border box as my defaults. My container, I'm going to set the height to the height of the screen. And then I'm going to say display grid. So when I look at my grid, you can see that I have 2 rows and I have 2 columns. If I just clear away this, it might make it a bit cleaner. Okay, so this is a pretty simple layout. Obviously in a grid you can make it more complex if you want, but I'm going to actually go with 2 columns and 2 rows. So to do that, I'm going to set up grid template columns. Now my columns are equal, so I'm going to say 1 FR and 1 FR. So FR stands for fraction. If I look at my grid template rows, you can see that my header takes up probably, I'm going to go with 1/5 of the page. And then the bottom section, the sidebar and the main, take up 4/5 of the page. So my grid first row is going to be 1 FR, and my second row is going to be 4 FR. So in total, I've got 5 parts. This is one of those 5 parts, and this is 4 of those 5 parts. Again, this is one of those 5 parts, and this is 4 of those 5 parts. And there are many other ways of setting up the columns and rows, but this is a good way of doing it for this simple case. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place the header in the grid. So I target that element and I can place it in row 1, and then for my column, I'm going to place it in the first column, but I'm going to tell it to span 2 columns. So it's going to go all the way across the screen. I'm going to set a border to thin, black, and solid, just so that I can see where it is placed on the screen. Now I'm going to place my side that's got my image in it, and this is going to be in grid row 2, and it's going to be in grid column 1, and I'm going to put a border that is thin, red, and solid around that. And I'm going to do my main, which is also in grid row 2, and it's in grid column 2. And let's put a border which is thin, blue, and solid around that. These are just temporary, so I can see what's going on. The last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back up to my container, and I'm going to say that my grid gap is 5 pixels. And that will actually place this little gap in here between my elements. Before I can see what this looks like on the screen, of course, I need to actually connect it to my web page. So, link my style sheet, which is called style.css. Alright, and when I put that on the screen, you can see here I have my header across the top with a black border around it. I have my image on the left with a red border around it, and I have my main on the right with a blue border around it.